All right, so welcome to this panel discussion. This is a topic that I find very interesting, and basically, the idea is that, I mean, in most of the great programmers that I have seen in recent times, they all love functional programming, right? But and there are aspects of functional programming languages that are just really brilliant. Uh, but the problem is that functional programming still remains a niche. Most of the industry does not do anything with functional programming. And the question is this something we need to change, or is this something that we shouldn't try to change, or is this something would be nice, but it is never going to happen because it is too difficult? Those are the kind of questions we are going to tackle today. And what we have here are people who have both, exposure to academia as well as industry. So, and plus we have people who have taught students in colleges, plus people who have used or tried to use functional programming in industrial context, enterprise contexts. So hopefully we can get an interesting discussion of the pros and cons of functional programming. Now, one of the things that I would like to do is, just have the panelists introduce themselves instead of me trying that. So can we start with
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So my name is Raju Pandey, and I did my undergraduate here at IIT Kharagpur, PhD from UT Austin, and then I have been teaching at University of California, Davis in Computer Science Department. And my research interests are more in the systems area, more on the dark side of programming languages.
I am Rusi Modi. I taught in Pune University for about 20 years, where Professor Sahasrabudhe introduced the scheme for teaching the first programming course in 1988. So I was part of a very pioneering effort, which is now more than 20 years old.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dhananjay Nene. I'm probably amongst the least academically qualified people to talk about computers. I've hardly learned any computer courses. I'm an MBA. I did my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. And for the past 21 years, I've been programming. And I love programming. I love different programming languages. And over the last few years, I've been initially studying, and for the last couple of years, actually using functional programming languages in the work I do. Yeah, that's about it.
Hi, I'm Kedar Swadi. I did my undergrad in the university. Actually, he's the one who got me down this path. So I went on to do a PhD in programming languages using a lot of what you heard right now. And now I have shifted gears and do something else in quantitative finance.
So, before we start discussing the pros and cons, I would like, could you just talk a little bit about what makes functional programming languages different from procedural and object-oriented languages? What are the key differences and why they're significant?
So we can look at functional programming languages in two ways. One is in terms of the features, and in terms of abstractions, in terms of programming models that they support. So if you look at it from a programming features and models point of view, basically what you're looking at is functional programming languages have a very simple idea, which is that the basic foundation is that everything is a function. A number is a function, and every computation is based on applying functions on certain inputs and returning certain output. That is, they have a very strict model of what the input is and what the output should be. Now, once you have this very basic core foundation, then what you're doing is that you are building REST, which includes function compositions, first-class functions, lazy evaluations, concurrent computing, all of this based on very simple model. So that's the idea of functional programming. when you go to more imperative programming languages, what they start to do is that they start to introduce some impurity. And most of the impurity comes in terms of adding relational aspects of it. That is, if I give you A and B, you're not going to get C all the time. You're going to get something else as well. And that depends on the context, or rather as we call it, the global variable or global context in which computing is being done. And what that does, that it starts to bring impurity in your system itself, which is that you can't now rely on the fact that you're going to get exactly the same value that you had given. Now you can't execute the same thing in parallel, because now there are dependencies or dependency in the order in which executions happen. You lose lazy evaluation as well. That is, you can't rely that I can wait till a certain computing can happen. So by having one simple impurity, now you have changed the entire computing model itself. So what that entails in terms of programming is that now when you program in functional programming languages, you're more free about how you do your computing. Whereas if you do in more impure languages, you now have to worry about the context, you have to maintain the context, you have to remember the context, and then you have to basically have tools that help you remember that particular context, the context in which certain computing is done. And that has profound impact on how you write your program, how you debug your program, how you evolve your program.
So actually, I think you said something very interesting, which is that when you go to a procedural language or an impure language, what they do is affect things in such a way that now you can no longer run the programs in parallel and feel comfortable about it. So there I would like to jump to Dhananjay to see if this, I mean, in more of a practical context, is this something you worry about? Is this something you faced and thought about?
The concurrency or the impurity part of it?
The fact that an impure language is not as good for concurrency as a pure functional language.
Sure. I mean, end of the day, a program essentially consists of moving parts.
Yeah.
And it's not just moving parts. It is like mechanical systems. There's moving data also there. And if some of that data is changing, then the predictability of what your program is doing goes down. You cannot, say with the same degree of confidence and guarantees that your program will do exactly what it was set out to do, because it's no longer, within the program's own capability, because it's all now a slave to the data in that context, really that he referred to. As programs become larger and more complicated, it becomes harder for us as programmers to, in our brains, thread through exactly what's happening. So at some stage there is a threshold, and that mutable data and the fact that people, different threads might actually be changing data in that global context. It's completely beyond our ability to then be able to say with any degree of assurance my program is really going to be able to work correctly. So then you are really, the end result is you tend to be, if I may use the word, religious, as in, you just say, I'm going to go with faith that my program is really going to work and ship it. Because you have no way to really assure yourself with a high degree of confidence when you have lots of moving parts that the program is really going to work the way you wanted it to.
So should I interpret that to mean that when you are using imperative programs, you are always a little uncomfortable about the safety of the programs you ship, and you would feel better if they were functional programs?
I mean, at the end of the day, you could, imagine it both ways, right? I could argue it out both ways. Yes, I could say, I'm really uncomfortable about this. But then, I am uncomfortable about driving a car. But then, if I wanted to really reduce that discomfort, I would need to drive a tank on Pune's roads. But there's a huge economic cost associated with it. There's a huge learning cost associated, and that's what you really need to trade off at the end of the day. Do you want a tank? Do you want a car? How does your comfort trade off with your wallet?
Yeah.
And I guess that's what you did. But at the end of the day, there's always some degree of discomfort. But it all boils down to what is the confidence you feel or no. I mean, when you talk of provability, you're no longer talking of confidence that you feel. It's now confidence that you know your program will do what it's supposed to do.
So, I mean, I'll just add one thing to it. I mean, there are two parts to it. The first part is that, the parallelism that you have in functional programming languages, it comes from a discipline. And that discipline is imposed by the language. Language says, you got to do this, that's it. And I'm going to tie your hands, and this is what a function means. And you cannot change anything outside the scope of the function. So it's a discipline. It's not just a language feature, but it's a discipline. And you can apply the same discipline in procedural languages as well. And people do that. And so you cannot say that procedural languages are going to be unsafe because they are procedural. So that's one issue. The second issue is, so people have written very complex programs, which are, in fact, I can guarantee you that this place is running embedded systems which are running multi-threaded, written in C, I think. So we are safe. The second thing is that while functional programming languages do give you parallelism, they do have limitations in terms of how do you bound them. That is, there is no way for you to say that this function is more important than the rest of the functions. So if you think of function programs as a graph, then how do you map these graphs to bounded resources? So at some point, you are bringing semantics of your application into it. So you have both. I mean, you can impose the discipline in imperative languages, and that's what people have done. I mean, they have brought a lot of the ideas from functional programming languages into imperative languages in terms of discipline, and then that's how you manage the complexity itself.
I have a quick statement there. We talked about concurrency and safety, and I don't know when we want to bring in that topic, but I think these tend to be overstated, in my opinion, in today's discussions about functional programming. Why do we need functional programming? Because there's multi-core and we need concurrency. I think at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of other benefits in terms of just the vocabulary through which you express your programs. I think that's a huge win. That's a huge win for us in terms of being able to write programs that are more understandable, B, less likely to be having defects, and C, much shorter and much easier to maintain. And for some reason, this functional programming discussion has been taken away by concurrency. At least I don't believe that's the big thing that they give you, or just safety alone. I think it's also the vocabulary through which we can express our programs, which make them safer, at the end of the day, and easier to maintain.
So I think
I'm supposed to play the role of the contrarian, so I'm supposed to question everything. So, the point was that functional programming languages are easier to maintain. I'm not sure about that part, and the reason I'm not sure about that part is I'll give you an example. And I'm going to give you the context. So I'll give you 3 examples. One, as a class that I teach. One, I have a company too, and we have used functional programming languages to do control systems. And 3, I'll give you example as a programmer. I love to program, so I'll give you all 3 examples. The first example is the class. So in class, we teach functional programming languages. I teach it. We teach everything, starting from function compositions and closures and delayed evaluations, everything. And when we do ask people to do projects, I get zero. So people have choice to use different kinds of abstractions. There is almost zero. There may be one student in the last 10 years who ever uses closures, whoever uses delayed evaluation. Almost zero. And the reason could be 2. It could be I'm a really bad teacher, or second could be that it's hard for them to understand. And closures are very, very hard to understand. So the complexity is in some of the abstractions themselves. So if you look at, for instance, JavaScript code, JavaScript has closures. They are very obtuse. If you look at some of the code, which I have looked at, they are very, very obtuse, because what people are doing, they're using these absolutely obscure abstractions, and they are very good programs. I mean, these are great programmers. But you don't write programs just for yourself. You write for others as well. And when I look at that code, I just can't make out what they are doing. So from a complexity point of view, they are very hard. Now let me give you an example from the second. Our company, we have people who have written these control systems in functional programming languages. And there is one guy who knows it. And he is the priest. And then rest of us have to basically, learn from that priest. And what has happened is that the ecosystem around that complexity, that is, nobody understands what he's doing. So it's not the problem of the language, it's the ecosystem that's missing. And that makes it harder for you to build a large scalable program. So what we have decided, we're going to transition. We're going to transition away from this whole priest-based software development. And the third one is I myself as a programmer. I mean, I write lots of programs, I write large programs. I use all the discipline, but I never use closures. I miss delayed evaluation. I would love to have it. But if you look at the complexity, I like to use very simple stuff. Simple variables, simple procedures. Don't do anything fancy. Once in a while, do function calls, parse functions. But so complexity is there in the language, there's no doubt. It is elegant, but it's hard to go to the next level in this language.
So
I may interrupt. I mean, why do you insist on using closures, and what is the other thing, delayed evaluation? I mean, why can't you just use the simpler things? I mean, for me, functional programming is about being able to express my problem in a way that is very close to the domain. That is one thing. Second is, and this is something probably people don't associate that much, but it's automatic memory management. I don't have to care about what happens there. I mean, that's a huge win for me in practical circumstances. Okay. The third thing is algebraic data types and the pattern matching that I'm able to do because of that. The fourth thing is the way that I'm able to use combinators, which makes me expand my vocabulary. I think you use the word vocabulary to have those higher order ways of looking at, what is it that I want to do with data? How is it that I want to churn it? I mean, everyone these days talks about map reduce. I mean, everyone in functional languages has been using it for, 25 years. Just not calling it reduce, calling it fold R and fold L.
yeah.
So I think to expect that people have to use closures and delayed evaluation, which actually I don't like, because I can't reason about delayed evaluation. I don't know how much, because I have to take care about how much memory is going to be used, because finally I live in the real world. Delayed evaluation, I just don't know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, so I don't use delayed evaluation.
So Kedar, you said something interesting, which is that everybody is getting all excited about MapReduce, and functional programming people have been using it for 25 years. Would you then say that people who don't learn functional programming are condemned to reinvent parts of it badly?
I think so. Badly is a very important adjective in there.
There is this thing called
Sorry. Or they, even worse, they are condemned to not reinventing it.
Oh, not use it at all.
Never discover them.
But
Yeah.
you can see that a lot of these ideas are filtering into traditional programming languages. What people are doing is they are picking up really good ideas, and these are functional programming language experts themselves who are picking these ideas, bringing into the normal languages, and trying to play with it. So
They are saying, like, okay, you don't go and buy a tank, but for safety, well, you put in airbags and you put in like side impact beams, and you're getting a little closer to the tank.
make sure you can go from place A to place B.
So you have been teaching. Oh, sorry, you had a point. To
I
follow.
was just saying that there is this well-known line called Greenspun's 10th law, which is normally not given in the context of functional
Lisp.
programming, but it says that every sufficiently complex system will have a subset of badly implemented common Lisp
yes.
as part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were saying something.
Yeah. No, sorry, continue.
I have a basic issue with this whole form of discussion, because I think that we are getting into functional languages and missing the point of functional paradigm.
Okay.
Okay, so that is one question which to some extent you brought up when you talked of discipline versus the language. But even more than that, there were a number of 3-4 points which Kedar listed. Memory management, pattern matching, one more thing, and combinators. What was the one more? Algebraic data type. Now, this kind of brings up one important thing, that how much of these things are essential to functional programming and how much is it just modern sensible programming. I just want to spend 1 minute on
Yeah.
this. That Lisp came out with garbage collection in 1960. Java introduced garbage collection into the mainstream in 1995. So from 1960 to 1995, that's 35 years. I don't know how many millions of students and programmers have been getting core dumps and seg faults. For what reason? Now, I think the reason is that we go too much by hype and not by. Now, the thing is, garbage collection has no advocate, because Java has garbage collection, C# has garbage collection, Lisp has garbage collection, Haskell has. So, what's the big deal? So, what happens is that the features which really matter are unhyped. And the features like closures and lazy evaluation, and these are the hyped features. So I think it's important to concentrate on the features which are less hyped and are more useful across the board.
So would you talk a little bit about which of the good features of functional programming have already made it into mainstream languages, and which are the ones that you would like to see come in, right? As in, I think the important point you're making here is that it doesn't matter which language you're using, but if you
I
think
won't say
like a
that.
functional program, well, or no, okay. But it is not necessary that you go to the language, you can have the feature come to you, right?
Yeah, well, I can write structured programming in assembly language,
Right.
but that doesn't mean it's a choice I would make.
Okay.
So I can write discipline of functional style in C, but it may not be a reasonable choice. If I know how to think functionally, I can write better C code, but that does it mean I should choose C? Maybe. If I'm writing a kernel module, I would choose C, but by default to choose C, just because that's the only thing I was taught in college, is a very sad state of affairs.
So talking about teaching, and you've been teaching various languages, I guess, for a long time. What is your experience with teaching functional programming languages versus the more traditional languages? I'm at the say undergraduate level.
To some extent, the experience coincides with what Professor Raju said, that people have trouble getting basic things. I don't think it is as bad as zero, but
I didn't mean zero getting it. I mean zero using it.
Using it.
yeah.
Got it. They didn't want to use it.
So people do. I suppose as a teacher, I ended up being the teacher who talks to the top of the class because I was using functional languages. Or maybe that's just my style. It doesn't make me a good teacher if I talk only to the good students. Okay. But I think that students over time, they do get into a certain style of thinking which they may not exactly know what is being taught when they are being taught it. But the style of functional programming rather than specifics of a language can be imparted.
So, Kedar, you have done, a PhD in this kind of stuff, and then afterwards in industry, I'm assuming that you just ended up having to do Java and Python and things like that. So, what has your experience been of the whole switch, and are you happier or, sad?
Yeah, I mean, for part of it, I didn't have a choice. I had to do what I had to do.
Yeah.
Even now, I don't have a choice. Primarily for the following reasons: a lot of the software development that I do has to also be done by people who are not even programmers to begin with. So for me to teach them functional languages, I don't have the time to do that. Secondly, and that's a problem with functional languages in general, is that they don't have a huge library base. They don't have a huge user community. Okay. Third is that often I end up having to write applications that need to run fast. Okay, even if I were to assume I had programmers who know how to use how to write programs in a functional language, there is again a problem with the compilers not being good enough. fourth is that it's difficult to find people who do functional programming. Actually, there's a company, I think it's called Jane Street, which uses only Camel for all their development. And they actually had come up with a paper maybe a few years back, I don't remember. But they had actually listed some of these points and more in terms of why they are able to do Camel programming and what are the problems that they face. So one of the reasons that they are able to do it is because the critical mass of programmers available in the US, in the Northeast, where a lot of people use SML or Camel is huge, and in comparison to at least what I might find in Pune. But I would say the availability of libraries is probably the biggest roadblock for me right now personally, in terms of adoption of programming functional languages in a practical setting.
So, Dhananjay, in an enterprise context, the problems that Kedar has pointed out, right? They seem to be like huge problems to me. Do you agree, or do you have a different view?
No, I agree, and I think we kind of coming back to that same thread where we're saying people. If I'm paraphrasing what others have said, but people find it hard to express themselves functionally, and therefore we do not have a large base of programmers who can write functional stuff, and that's a problem. That's a problem, huge problem in the enterprise if you wanted to really push in functional programming. I think in terms of libraries, again depending on what you're working on. I mean, if you're working on C++, Java, Python, they are not true functional languages to begin with. You can't expect functional libraries to be there. I think it's probably not an expectation I would set for myself. But if I was looking at let's say something like Haskell or Clojure, or at least with Haskell there are a fair degree of libraries I see. With Erlang I see a fair degree of libraries. With Clojure and Scala, I have the ability of JVM interoperability. So maybe that library itself is not functional, but I could still use it in a reasonably functional fashion. Actually, those are some of the things that were not available earlier, especially because of JVM interoperability. So yes, these are problems, and these are big problems because of which I personally believe adoption will be slow. But I think again the adoption. I'm very optimistic that the adoption will be there. But it will be very slow because we really have to work with, not just the software, but the peopleware, and that's going to take quite some time to kind of upgrade.
So both of these pointed to a problem of people don't get functional programming. It's difficult for them to learn. I'm hoping on this side, I'm wondering whether this is a fundamental problem with the functional paradigm, or is it because everybody gets taught C in the beginning and then you're spoiled after that, and your thinking is wrong?
I think there are two things. One is, of course, we are taught C first, and so you develop a certain paradigm and you like to follow it. And I think the second one is more insidious in the sense that what happens is that even if you like, and I love functional programming, what happens is that by the time you develop an expertise, you have been corrupted by you have been pulled into the dark side, which is you start to program Java, you program more Java, and you've forgotten most of your functional programming. So you never get a chance to develop great expertise. I mean, the classes we teach, these are 10 weeks classes. You're not going to become an expert in 10 weeks. And after 10 weeks, most probably you're not going to see it again. And so the lack of ecosystem, the lack of people who are around you who are developing it, as you were saying, and then the time to develop the expertise, that makes it hard. And then, of course, Microsoft is there giving you free software to develop it in C#.
Just like to add to this, that in a typical university curriculum, you will have an introductory programming class of a few weeks in which you are taught something. I taught a functional language, most people may be teaching C or Java or whatever. After that, there are dozens of courses, operating systems, and so, all sorts of other courses that are there in a computer science department, where you fall back onto something else. Now, if there is a possibility that functional programming can be something beyond just
the language
just
course.
one thing, one language, that is completely wiped out by the time they are out of that.
I think it's also because most of the times, you have functional language course, it centers around how to build a compiler. Okay. Often, once you get on to even the basic algorithms course, all the algorithms, lot of algorithms are so much based around, the von Neumann machine, that you have to make sure that, this is the pointer, and then you have to turn the subtree this way or that way. And for that to be translated in a functional style is something that requires an extra effort, which is not the central aspect of the algorithms course. The same goes for networking or databases, where at some point the networking has to be about bits and bytes. There is no nice way to talk about that in a functional aspect. So to bridge the gaps between this is not something that is always done. And unless you do that, which requires quite a bit of effort, especially from a person who is a networking guy and who doesn't care about how you do it, you just want to do it. It becomes difficult to actually keep propagating that information through other courses.
So a different question I have is, okay, so for whatever reasons, let's say your company or enterprise or whatever is not going to adopt functional programming for the next product, and your university isn't going to teach it, but either as a student or as a professional, should they learn functional programming, take the effort that you're talking about in any case, and will that make them a better programmer?
Please go ahead. I can narrate my experience in Python. I started learning Python a few years ago, but lately, much of the Python code I write, I try to write it as much functional as I can. Python is not a fundamentally a strong functional programming language, but at the end of the day, it really boils down to what kind of abstractions you use in the code, and I can very easily use some of those abstractions, in Python code. Let me just digress by giving an example. Let's say I have an orders table and of the existing orders, and I have shipped some of the orders to a customer, and I want to generate an invoice out of it. Now I am told by somebody saying, take the list of orders, select the ones which have shipped status on it, compute the tax on each one of them based on some tax code, multiply the rate and the quantity, add the tax based on the tax code, and sum everything together, generate an invoice and send it. Now I can write it two ways. I can write deeply nested for loops, or I can write using essentially three functions, and I can say just map everything over that table I have, filter the shipped goods, map the tax rate to compute the total, and then reduce or fold into a total amount. Now that is an abstraction that I am able to express the same program in a very, very different way. And I can choose to do that in C, in Python, in Java, in whatever shape and form I'm writing today. Most languages will support that. And if they don't support it, it's trivial to write those constructs yourself. So I think it helps if we kind of do that. I found it very helpful. I've generally encouraged people to kind of do that, because that's the only way we will kind of start changing our own thought process to express ourselves in terms of what we are doing in that code, rather than in terms of detailed tactical stuff, saying for I in all the rows in my table, if row dot something is shipped, and so on and so on, which is like it's got lots of moving parts. There are many counters. There are lots of stuff there. Ensure that I can express it very succinctly, and I can do it in any language, and I don't need to be using a functional programming language to adopt a functional programming style. And the more I do it, the easier it is for me and the people I work with to then eventually move to a functional programming language. I think that's one way to kind of look at it.
So, are you saying that the traditional way programming languages, that style of thinking encourages you to write programs which are essentially about lots of little steps, do this, do that, do this, do that. Whereas, like Kedar pointed out earlier, the functional programming style of thinking allows you to map higher level abstractions so that it more closely matches what you're trying to do, the business logic, as opposed to the computer logic.
That would be emphatic yes, and it starts approaching a declarative expression as opposed to a sequential expression.
Okay, that's interesting. So I want to pause just a couple of minutes to see if anybody has questions. We can continue with some standard issues afterwards. Yeah. How to think functionally? Anybody want to take that?
See, let's start from a certain basic situation when you are a programmer. If you are a programmer, you have to do things. I mean, you are writing a program so that your program does something. So, with all this talk of declarative and functional stuff going on, the fact is that at some fundamental level, you want to do what we may call imperation. Okay. Now, if the machine states which your program is going to generate, if they were isomorphic to your brain states of the problem, then we don't need programming languages at all. We can write in assembly language. Is that so far clear? Any program that you write in any language, whether it's so-called functional or imperative or assembly or anything else, it will be generating machine states because you write the program to do something. Okay? When you do something, there are machine states. If the states through which the machine goes through are coinciding with the states which you want to think with, then you don't need a programming language. You can just write in machine language. Right? So we use programming languages because the states which we want to think with are not the states which the machine goes through. Now the next thing that comes about is that these two things, declaration and imperation, if I may call it that, are the line between them is drawn differently in different programming languages. But it is a mistake to assume that, for example, C is not declarative. When you declare types in C, you are using a declarative sub-language of C, and the compiler imperates that declaration into memory layouts. Okay. So the key thing when you think functionally is not to think of what to do, but what is. Isness is what characterizes functional thinking, and doing is what characterizes procedural thinking. If you look at the language which you use, when you say, now I shall do this, now I will go there, this is the kind of language you will see an imperative programming using. It implies that he doesn't know how to think functionally. When the programmer says, this is what we want, and then somebody else deals with how to do that then that's functional thinking. This is just a very brief. That's all.
Let me give you a direct answer. Start programming in functional languages. Step by step you start understanding, why people use certain functions, why people structure their program certain way. After some time you start appreciating it, and then you internalize it, and then you can say you have understood it. I mean, that's what I mean when I say understand it.
Also, I think one thing I want to point out is that there is a very famous paper called Why Functional Programming Matters. It's a difficult paper, but if you read it a bunch of times and you really understand what he's trying to say, it will change you as a programmer. Yeah.
So, well, in the context of this panel discussion, where we are talking about should every programmer learn functional programming. So, well, in the university we had this course in functional programming where I used to program in Lisp, but then as soon as that was over, I wrote that paper and it was over. I actually could not figure out how to use that further. I mean, this course on operating system is all the code. We had this book on Unix, Maurice J. Bach. It had all the code in C. And then algorithms, as he mentioned, it has everything in C. I mean, we think in terms of procedural programming for all these things. So I would like to ask professors, why don't the teaching community come up with something to actually make us realize the importance of functional programming, and so that we could actually have a course in data structures and algorithms using functional programming. That would be more helpful to understand like SimAPReduce, that we are talking that we'll be missing something.
That's a very good question. That's a really good, and that's something we see in our students. I see in myself actually. But I look at a programmer, a great programmer, not an ordinary one, and I think you are a great one. A great one as a great chef, okay? And you know what a great chef is? A cook. A great cook has to know every possible ingredient. It has to know how it tastes. They have to know what are the different processes of cooking. They have to know how to put the things together. So if you want to be a great programmer, you shouldn't think of functional programming language as a set of constructs and hence you have to learn those constructs. What you're learning in functional programming languages is a set of abstractions and tools that you can use to compose your palette. Basically, that becomes part of your tool set. And as a great programmer, you basically are choosing and combining them together. So the things we talked about, things like, functions. So when you're writing a program in C, you could write your program in C, but function always returns a value. It's independent of its context. Function composition. If you write it in C, you can write for programs in C which have true function compositions. You can write, things like you can build closures in C as well, or you can build pattern matching. So these are some wonderful tools that you learn from a language, and language is about a set of abstractions and patterns, and then it becomes part of your tool chest. So in academia, unfortunately, we are driven by the resources we have, and as part of, the way we look at education is more in terms of we are not trying to make you an expert in C, or we are not trying to make you an expert in Java, or for that matter in functional programming languages. That's not our goal. Our goal is to make you a computer scientist, and the job of a computer scientist is to not know programming. Their job is to understand how you design systems and how you reason with systems and how you transform systems. And that's why we teach you programming languages and compilers and operating system. It's not, when we teach you compilers, we don't teach you how to write a compiler. That's not the goal. Who wants to write a C compiler anymore? But what we teach you there is that how do you model systems, and how do you represent them, and how do you transform them, and what are the wonderful algorithms that you could use in other domains. So we look at teaching in terms of giving you a set of tools that makes you a great programmer and a computer scientist.
There is a question from Nagpur.
Yeah.
Nagpur, you are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hello, sir. Sir, I wanted to know that as I am a diploma level student, I can't understand 90% of the text that you are saying. But one question really came to my mind, that is, as a aspiring programmer of the traditional languages, if I learn functional programming, will that help shape my skills? And if yes, should I learn functional programming first or the traditional programming languages first?
Did you say help sell your skills?
Yeah, if I learn functional programming languages, sir, will they help shape up my programming skills in the current languages and overall programming skills? And if yes, should I learn functional programming languages first, or should I just go by the curriculum and learn them whenever I get the chance to?
Okay, I'll give you a practical answer. Just learn your curriculum, you'll get a job that way. Because in a company, if you go for an interview, they'll not ask, do you know ML? They'll ask, do you know Java? That's the practical answer. As a long-term answer as to what you should know and what might help you being a better programmer, I will say that side by side or whenever you get the time, please learn functional programming. There are a bunch of books that actually are a very gentle introduction to functional programming languages, and you will at some point you'll also start appreciating why and how they are actually a part of what you will have to do. For example, let's say something practical like unit testing. You know, that is in a way trying to trying to do something very functional. It's saying that no matter how I call this one function, it's going to exactly return me this answer. So, a theoretician will call it referential transparency, but you are just calling it unit testing. So, for you to be able to understand why this is so important, I think exposure to functional programming will certainly be useful.
I have
in your discussion so far, there was one point that you made that students are not able to understand functional programming that you people teach, the honorable experts teach. Many a times because they have been exposed to C and other traditional languages earlier. Shall I also face those problems? And may I overcome in some way?
Can I choose to answer by digressing just a little bit?
Yeah.
Exactly this situation was there probably 20 years ago when people used to worry about object orientation. We can't think in object oriented way. We get taught object oriented, but we don't use object oriented. There's a tremendous degree of similarities between that situation then and the situation I see with functional programming today. And I think in due course, what happened with OO will also kind of also happen with FP. It'll start getting used more and more and more. We are essentially creatures of osmosis. If I don't get 5 people around me who talk functional programming, who walk functional programming, then I don't learn functional programming. One of the 5 of us has to kind of take the initiative and say, okay, I'm going to do it, and the other 4 will benefit, and then other 4 another 4. And that will happen. In any random population, you will find few people taking initiative, and over a period of time, that osmosis working. But to really answer your question, I mean, people will learn functional programming, over a period of time, and what they are finding it hard to learn today, given a particular instruction context, I think they will find in exactly the same situation tomorrow easier, because 3 of the students that they are interacting with are now better capable of being able to express that and help the other students as well. I think we today don't have sufficient number of people and sufficient number of contexts into which we can apply this knowledge. I think that's an issue, and that only will go away over a period of time. At least that's my perception.
I have an anecdote related to this. Basically, I had put up a problem on the net saying that anybody who's able to solve this problem in a programming language of your choice, I'll help you find a job in Pune, right? And the best solution to that was submitted by a student in Ratnagiri who was a BCom and failed first year of MCA, and he had submitted it in Haskell. Okay. And today he has an excellent job in Pune. So my point is that, just because you are in diploma, just because you're in Nagpur, or just because XYZ doesn't necessarily mean that you will not be able to do it.
There is a question from Aurangabad as well. So Aurangabad, please go ahead.
The question was, should I study functional programming first, because it seems that may be a good thing. But you must realize that the problem can be exactly reverse, and if you start with functional programming and then you go to imperative programming, and I can tell you this is a fact I have seen many times, people can write absolutely ridiculous imperative programs because they are thinking totally functional. So the problem is equal both ways, and the only real answer is that you need to have a certain flexibility. Some things are appropriate in one context, some things are appropriate in another context. And if your basic structure of your brain cells are going to be defined by what you learned first, then you really need to not think so much about programming languages and so on, but as to how to increase your own flexibility.
Sir, 1 minute. 1 minute.
Yeah, I just like to make a suggestion. From tying together all the things that have been said. So what I feel like what Professor Raju said, that it's just 10 weeks that a programming language is taught, and tied with say for example what's mentioned by Kernighan and Ritchie in their C programming language book, that it's 10 years that we've been coding in C, and even now we still find that we are still learning. So tying these two things together and, the academic context and the industrial context, I think what will be great is if company, especially considering that distance education is now assuming, great proportions with things like Coursera and EDX from reputed universities and video conferencing that's available. What I think will be really great to see a change in the entire ecosystem is if companies stop, saying that either you have a full-time job or none. So now jobs should be tailored to what the employee wants to contribute. So an 8-hour full-time job or a 6-hour job or a 4-hour job, today 4 hours, after 6 months 6 hours, it's all very tunable. So once that tunability is incorporated, and the other thing that oftentimes employers are fearful that if I let my employee learn, then I risk the chance of losing him. I'm making him or her more attractive to hop jobs. So once companies overcome this fear also, and this distance education is tied in, what can really be harnessed is the interest aspect. So when somebody is going through a full-fledged academic degree course at his or her age and with that academic workload, there may be no interest in something like functional programming. His core emphasis is that as soon as I get my certification, I must land a job, no matter what. But once that financial stability sets in, and the maturity and things, your quest for career satisfaction sets in.
We get the point that the system changing in that way would really be great. That'd be excellent, and the employer should start doing such things. But yes, actually that's true.
People expect 100% salary for 30%.
Yeah, absolutely. I was not explicit about that. That's what I meant.
Right.
Proportionate to what you commit, you get salary.
But as a simpler first step, I have a question here, which is if somebody on their own wants to, learn functional programming or at least understand the paradigm, what language would you suggest starting with? Any favorites?
I would say, this is probably a very prejudiced answer, but I would probably suggest SML or Camel, not even O. Haskell is probably just as good. I've just been a Camel programmer for a longer time. I would absolutely not suggest Lisp. There are multiple reasons. One is, everything is a parenthesis, and I'll tell you, the problem is that people have problems learning Emacs or VI, trying to, match the parentheses. So they spend more time trying to learn a editor which is going to help them, or maybe a editor which helps them, indent it the right way. Okay. For the same reason, I'd never use Python, because it doesn't do a sensible thing with white spaces. Okay. So Haskell or ML, they are very succinct. They don't require you to know any editor. Okay, you could even have the write down small expressions inside Haskell itself, or you could write files which are simple. So in that sense, I think Haskell or Camel or SML are, in my opinion, the better languages to get started with.
Any other opinions?
My choice is
Haskell. Okay.
Just one caveat in the context of Haskell. My choice would be Haskell, but I would just tell the person, be prepared to study for the long haul. This is not something you're going to learn tomorrow or day after, or in 2 months there's no learn Haskell in 21 days. It's much easier to learn dynamically typed functional language with immutability. You could get so much faster in 2-3 months. To me, it happened to be Erlang. In 2-3 months, I was absolutely comfortable with that. Whereas with Haskell, it's still continuing. You're still kind of learning more stuff because there's so much stuff that when you start to getting into the typed parts of functional programming, your learning curve is continuous for the long haul. You start becoming productive in a few months, but that you still keep on learning a lot for a long duration of time. So if you want something and say I need to get understand functional part first, the other option you may want to consider is dealing with the typed aspects of it. Say I'll learn a statically typed functional language later. Let me just focus on the functional thinking parts, and you could choose a dynamically typed language and you'd probably be much better off. For me, it happened to be Erlang.
Yeah.
I don't know if for somebody else Clojure is the one, or I haven't experienced it, so I'm not able to advise it.
Yeah.
But I think choosing a dynamically typed language will help you get past the functional learning curve much faster, rather than getting bogged down in types.
So I think I should explain that a little bit, which is that languages like Haskell and Scala are statically typed, which means that either you have to define all the types or they have to be inferred properly. And for that to happen properly, they have a very complex type system, and which can get quite hairy. Although it is, when you do really understand it, it pays off huge dividends. But that's a big learning curve which you have to overcome before you start doing a lot of functional programming there. Whereas there are languages like Erlang and what else? Clojure, which don't have static typing. They have dynamic typing like Python and Ruby. So you don't worry about the types, but you start doing functional programming right away. So you're writing in terms of functions, you're doing composability of functions and so on. So you're getting all the benefits of abstraction and functional style of thinking, but not dealing with the type system stuff. Yeah, Anuradha?
You getting benefits of some abstractions. Haskell gives you many other abstractions which you don't have.
Right.
I would like to add my experience. I recently graduated like 3 months back, and I joined a company called HelpShift, where we do Clojure. So doing Clojure, they were like, okay, go ahead and just learn Clojure. And the first one was like mind blowing. It was like, did I learn anything in past 4 years? And slowly, I think there is a more core fundamental problem than what was pointed out. I think the problem is that in the 4 years of engineering, I don't think we really understand that what is really computer science. We tend to think that computer science is about computers. And that is, I think, the fundamental core problem that why people just don't get it. Because they think it's about steps. It's not about the idea, but it's actually the other way around. NFP is all about the idea. It's not about the steps.
I think that's a very interesting point and important point, and goes back to Robin Milner's work, which is a lot of what he was trying to do, and Strachey and Scott before him, was extract computer science out of the Turing machine, which plays around with bits on a tape, and move it into maths, where computer science is about applying functions to an input to produce an output. So that's a different style of thinking. And you had something to say?
Actually, I have 2 points to make about learning of functional languages. One is that there's an old saying that if you have a C programmer and you give him any language, he'll program in C. So if you notice the way people jump into a new programming language, there is no first-class clarity that there is a distinction between programming paradigm and programming language. And I think this is the key problem. And people understand programming languages in terms of syntactic categories or data categories, and that's about it. Nobody asks the question, what are the values supported by this? Or questions about first-classness. Are the types, when are the types bound, for example, binding times of types or data, or things like this. So the biggest mistakes people who jump into Haskell, for example, make is Haskell is quite a flabby language today because of its becoming real world. and they jump into these things called monads because they know classically that they have done they have not done functional programming before, and there is something called a do which closely resembles their imperative model, and you immediately jump to using this. Now it must be understood that for 20 years, I mean, when I finished my graduation, I was probably implementing something similar, and over 20 years, functional programmers have been fighting fighting all they could to be able to make this thing clean into the language, the impurities you were talking about. And today, by heavyweight category theory, monads have been fudged and fit and made to work. So the semanticists are happy, but as terms of a programmer, when he jumps into very heavyweight category theory, it's a real mess.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, functional programs which were very clean and structured using higher order concepts like Folder years ago, today have become messy because monad-based binding is the most unstructured way of breaking a type system. And now people are moving towards arrows, other categories, and so on to clean up the mess. So, if you want to study functional programming, don't begin with monads. First thumb rule. Try to work with old-fashioned functional languages with a strong type system, which is type static, and I would think SML is a good choice, or Haskell 98 without any of the fancy new stuff, with late types, rank 1, rank 2 types, and all that stuff. The second point I want to make is about enterprise programming, and I thought there was a point which was not touched here. I have been working on Haskell on a large enterprise system, and my finding is that in large systems, you cannot ask the question, what programming language shall I use, too early. Any real system is a kind of, huge spectrum of different kinds of paradigms working together. The most front end, where you're talking to a front desk, somebody operating, there is an engine which is in the center, there are back end resources which are being fudged. So if you look at a classical functional solution, so to say, which Kedar nicely pointed out, you're not writing compilers all the time. Functional paradigm is very neatly adaptable to what I call transformational systems. You take the whole chunk of the input, do transformation, whether it's an abstract syntax tree or whatever it might be, and you rewrite it in some new way, whatever that might be. So taking a whole chunk, but there's another class which are called reactive systems, a TCP IP stack, or any protocol stack where you're continuously, there's an automaton running, evaluating. And for solving these problems, you have to use heavyweight solutions like monads because you need state. And then you have to bang your head against state. Somebody has to manage state. So you come down to this. So when you're looking at an enterprise scale problem, you have to identify those parts which are suitable for any particular paradigm. A certain core may be suitable for functional, and then you may decide what the language is based on the realism of the tools. Your thinking language doesn't have to be a programming language in any case. So I think that the real messes are coming because we are trying to figure out one language or one paradigm to solve the problem, and that's never going to happen.
Just a quick comment there. The things that you said, where transformational versus reactive. I find Erlang exceptionally good functional programming language for reactive systems.
I accept that, yeah.
Yeah, last question. We're running out of time. Yeah.
I guess it's not a question, but I guess it's getting very heavy and like kind of losing track of what's happening. But to come to my point, I guess there is a deep contradiction running throughout this discussion. Does it? I mean, one aspect is that everybody should adopt functional programming paradigm, and it should have a mass scale adoption. At the second, and the second thought, I guess it's running throughout, is that it's very difficult to sort of learn function. Somebody says that 20 years ago, nobody knew object-oriented paradigm. Today, I would say people know C++, people know Java, but do they really know object orientation? My answer would be not really. So, if it's a very crude comparison, but if I compare functional programming with iPhone, iPhone is adopted because it's very easy to learn. Now, maybe it's a far-fetched comparison, but if you want IT industry to use functional programming or paradigm to its fullest, I guess it should be kind of pretty easy to learn, and the learning curve should be.
If you are using C or C++, you are doing something very difficult, but just because everyone else is doing it, you think it's easy. No, I don't think functional languages are 1/10 the difficulty of trying to do something in C++.
Do you think people
it is
know
only
object, No, do you think people know object-oriented programming paradigm? They know C++, they know Java. But if you ask me if they really know object-oriented concepts, the majority...
I don't know if people even know imperative, but they write C
Agreed.
code.
I mean, that's the second... that's a...
So let's...
Yeah, I'd like to wrap up.
Yeah, just last one. I think the most important thing is, forget about this functional and this kind of religious wars. First thing one should learn is the ability to think abstraction.
Yeah.
I think that's the key thing. You know, once you are able to kind of elevate yourself to that abstractive thinking, the current thinking, you know, the current mindset of the people is API thinking. So unless you move from API thinking to the abstraction thinking, is functional, or as ma'am has pointed out, you will write functional programming in the C way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the issue is not functional programming. The issue is how much of abstractive thinking can people have. That's the crux of
So I think that's a great thing to wrap up with, which is that what a programmer really should understand is abstract thinking, and functional paradigm is one of the ways where it can really help develop your abstract thinking, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be tied to a particular language. What you should do is learn that style of thinking and then see where in your life you can apply it in your context. You don't apply it everywhere. You don't apply it all the time. Sometimes it's just, a simple C program is the best way of doing things. But there are enough problems where that style of thinking will really, really help you. So that's it. I think some people will leave, but others are going to hang out for a little while. So we can take some questions offline. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. May I request Anand to hand over a small gift to all the panelists?
Okay, thanks. I'll make a movie. Yeah.
Naveed comes here very often, so he must take it.
We have already got that.
One final announcement before you all leave. The next session for November 3rd, because of Diwali, we will be working on that day, so we won't have this Turing session. We're pushing that by a couple of weeks. The next session will be on the last Saturday of November, that is November 24th. And the session will be based on the life and works of Butler Lamson. The presenter is Niran Karnik from BMC. So it's November 24th. We will have the updated data available on the Turing website, Persistence Turing website. Thank you all.